My name is Margaret Thompson, and at 68 years old, I never imagined I'd be facing homelessness. Just 3 months after burying my beloved husband Robert in the rain-soaked cemetery of suburban Denver, Colorado, my daughter-in-law Jessica delivered the cruelest ultimatum of my life. "Either you work or you're out on the street, Margaret," she said coldly, standing in the doorway of what used to be my home for 35 years. Her arms were crossed, her perfectly manicured nails tapping impatiently against her designer blazer. Behind her, I could see my son Michael avoiding eye contact, his shoulders slumped in defeat. The autumn leaves were falling outside our large bay windows, the same windows where Robert and I used to watch the sunrise together every morning with our coffee and shared dreams. Now, those windows felt like prison bars, trapping me in a nightmare I couldn't escape. The familiar scent of pumpkin spice candles that I had lit every October for decades now felt mockingly cheerful against the harsh reality of my situation. "Jessica, please," I whispered, my voice trembling like autumn leaves in the wind. "I've been grieving. Robert left me this house. We built our life here together, painted every room, planted the garden outside, chose every piece of furniture with love and hope for our future." "Actually," she interrupted with a smirk that revealed her true nature, "Michael inherited everything. And since I'm his wife, I have equal say in what happens to this property. The mortgage payments are enormous, and we can't afford to support a freeloader who contributes nothing to this household." The word freeloader hit me like a physical blow to my chest, stealing my breath and making my heart race with panic. For 40 years, I had been a devoted wife and mother. I had raised 3 children, including Michael when his biological mother abandoned him, sacrificed my career dreams as a teacher to support Robert's struggling accounting business, and spent countless nights caring for sick family members without complaint. I had organized neighborhood charity drives, volunteered at the local food bank, and spent my golden years caring for Robert through his long battle with cancer. Now, in my time of greatest need and deepest grief, I was being called a burden. The house felt suffocatingly quiet, except for the tick of the grandfather clock Robert had bought me for our 20th anniversary. Each tick seemed to count down to my inevitable homelessness like a time bomb of despair. The Persian rugs beneath my feet, gifts from Robert's business travels, the family photos on the mantelpiece chronicling decades of birthdays and holidays, the hand-painted china cabinet filled with wedding gifts from friends who had watched us build our life together. Everything felt like it was slipping away like sand through my fingers. "I raised you like my own son," I pleaded to Michael, tears streaming down my cheeks and leaving salt tracks on my weathered skin. "When your mother abandoned you at 5 years old, I was there. I bandaged your scraped knees, helped with your homework every night, attended every soccer game, even when it meant leaving work early. I taught you to ride a bike, drove you to countless birthday parties, stayed up all night when you had nightmares." Michael finally looked at me, his eyes filled with guilt and shame that made him appear younger than his 35 years. "Mom Margaret, I'm sorry, but Jessica's right. We need to be practical about this situation. You're still young enough to work. There are plenty of jobs for seniors these days: grocery stores, retail, customer service." The betrayal cut deeper than any physical pain I had ever experienced, deeper than the arthritis in my joints or the grief that had consumed me since Robert's death. This was the boy I had sung lullabies to when thunderstorms frightened him, the teenager I had stayed up all night waiting for when he missed curfew, the young man whose college tuition I had helped pay by working part-time at the local library, while Robert built his business. As I stood there in my own living room, surrounded by a lifetime of memories and love, I realized that this wasn't just about money or housing. This was about respect, dignity, and the value of human life beyond economic productivity. The fight ahead wouldn't just be for shelter. It would be for my very identity and worth as a human being who had spent her entire adult life serving others. But they had underestimated Margaret Thompson. I had survived the Great Recession. When Robert's business nearly failed, raised children during difficult times, and supported a family through countless challenges. If they wanted to see what this elderly woman could do when pushed to her breaking point, they were about to find out. Don't forget to tell us where you're watching from and subscribe for the next chapter. The real fight is just beginning, and Margaret Thompson is far from defeated. The next morning, I woke up in my own bed for what I knew might be one of the last times. The familiar weight of Robert's pillow next to me, still carrying the faint scent of his cologne, provided little comfort against the harsh reality awaiting me. Jessica had given me 2 weeks to find employment and start contributing to household expenses or face eviction from my own home. The irony wasn't lost on me. I needed to pay rent to live in the house my deceased husband had worked his entire life to own. I dressed carefully in my best navy suit, the one I wore to Robert's funeral just 3 months ago, and applied makeup to cover the dark circles under my eyes from sleepless nights filled with worry. As I stood before the mirror in my bedroom, I practiced introducing myself to potential employers, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. "Hello, I'm Margaret Thompson, and I'm looking for employment." The words felt foreign in my mouth after 4 decades away from the workforce. I stepped out into the crisp Denver morning, the Rocky Mountains visible in the distance like silent witnesses to my struggle. The job market for a 68-year-old widow with a 40-year gap in employment was even more brutal than I had imagined. Each business I entered felt like walking into a courtroom where I was already judged and found wanting. My first stop was Miller's department store, where I had shopped for decades and knew several employees by name. The 19-year-old manager, barely older than my grandson Tommy, looked at my handwritten application with barely concealed disdain. His name tag read Brandon, and his dismissive attitude made me feel ancient and irrelevant. "Ma'am, we typically hire people with more recent retail experience. And honestly, the physical demands of this job might be challenging for someone your age. You'd be on your feet for 8 hours, lifting boxes, dealing with difficult customers." During holiday rushes, the rejection stung, but I pressed on with determination that surprised even me. At Sunrise Diner, a place where Robert and I had celebrated numerous anniversaries, the owner was more direct but equally crushing. "Margaret, I remember you and Robert coming here for years, but I need servers who can keep up with the lunch, rush, memorize complex orders, and move quickly between tables. No offense, but you might slow down the younger girls, and that could hurt tips for everyone." By afternoon, I had visited 12 establishments, each rejection chipping away at my dignity like water-eroding stone. The worst was at TechStart Solutions, a gleaming office building downtown where the millennial receptionist literally laughed when I inquired about their posted administrative position. "We're looking for digital natives who understand social media, cloud computing, and can adapt to rapidly changing technology platforms," she explained, as if I were some prehistoric creature who had wandered in from another era. Exhausted and defeated, I sat on a weathered bench in Washington Park, watching young mothers push their children on swings while dogs played freely in the afternoon sun. The scene was achingly familiar. I remembered bringing Michael here when he was small, how he would beg me to push him higher, higher, while his laughter echoed across the playground. Now that same little boy was prepared to cast me out onto these very streets where homeless individuals pushed shopping carts filled with their entire lives. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Any luck today? Remember, you have 12 days left. BTW, I'm showing your room to potential renters tomorrow." The cruelty of the countdown made my hands shake with rage and fear. I was being treated like an unwanted tenant rather than a grieving widow who had spent decades contributing to this family's success and happiness. The autumn air was getting colder, and I pulled my coat tighter, wondering where I would be sleeping when Denver's harsh winter arrived with its sub-zero temperatures and relentless snow. That evening, I returned home to find Jessica redecorating my bedroom with the enthusiasm of someone planning a vacation. She was boxing up my personal belongings, photos of Robert and me, books I had collected over decades, the jewelry box he had given me for our silver anniversary. "I'm turning this into an office space," she announced cheerfully, as if discussing weekend plans. "Much better use of space than housing someone who doesn't contribute financially to our household." Michael was nowhere to be found, probably hiding in his man cave basement, avoiding the uncomfortable reality of his stepmother's suffering while playing video games or watching sports. The house felt foreign now, like I was a guest who had overstayed her welcome rather than the woman who had made this house a home for over 3 decades. But as I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling Robert and I had painted together during our first year of marriage, something inside me began to harden like steel forged in fire. I thought about all the other elderly people who must face this same impossible situation, forced to choose between dignity and survival, abandoned by the families they had sacrificed everything to raise and nurture. This wasn't just my fight anymore. This was about every senior citizen discarded by a society that measured human worth by economic productivity rather than lifetime contributions. Day 5 of my job search led me to Mercy Community Center, a modest brick building nestled between a coffee shop and a used bookstore in Denver's historic Highlands neighborhood. I had volunteered here years ago during my marriage, organizing holiday food drives and coordinating senior services when Robert's health still allowed me such luxuries. I hoped they might have a position for someone with my experience in organizing, charity drives and community outreach, but instead, I found something much more valuable. I wasn't alone in this nightmare. "Margaret Thompson," called a familiar voice that sparked memories of happier times. Eleanor Rodriguez, 72, sat behind the volunteer coordinator desk, her silver hair neatly braided and her warm brown eyes crinkling with recognition. We had worked together on several fundraising committees before Robert's illness consumed all my time and energy. "What brings you here, dear? It's been too long since we've seen you." The kindness in her voice nearly broke my carefully constructed composure. When I explained my situation, fighting back tears of shame and frustration, Eleanor's face darkened with recognition rather than surprise. Her expression shifted from welcome to grim understanding that chilled me to my core. "Margaret, you're the 3rd widow this month with the exact same story," she said quietly, glancing around the bustling community center to ensure privacy. "It's becoming an epidemic in our community. Adult children forcing elderly parents out of their homes, claiming financial necessity while they upgrade their lifestyles with inheritance money and property values." She led me to a quiet corner where folding tables were set up for various community programs. The familiar smell of coffee and the gentle hum of seniors engaged in activities created an atmosphere of safety I hadn't felt in weeks. Eleanor introduced me to Dorothy Chen, 75, who was carefully sorting donated winter clothes with the precision of someone who understood the value of every warm garment. Dorothy's story was eerily similar to mine, like we were reading from the same tragic script. Her son had inherited her house after her husband's death from a stroke, then demanded she pay market-rate rent or leave the home where she had raised 4 children and lived for 47 years. "I worked as a registered nurse for 45 years, Dorothy said, her voice bitter with betrayal. "Saved lives during 3 different flu epidemics, raised 4 successful children as a single mother after my first husband died young, and now I'm sleeping on my daughter's couch because I'm supposedly financially irresponsible for expecting basic respect." Eleanor leaned closer, lowering her voice to barely above a whisper. "There's someone you both need to meet. Sarah Martinez is an investigative journalist with the Denver Post who's been researching what she calls family financial abuse, adult children exploiting inheritance laws to push out surviving parents while claiming moral and financial justification." That afternoon, I sat across from Sarah in Muddy Waters Coffee, a small shop downtown where the afternoon light filtered through large windows, creating patterns on worn wooden tables. She was younger than my grandson, probably in her early 30s, but her eyes held the sharp intelligence and compassionate determination of someone who had witnessed too much injustice to remain silent. Her notebook was already filled with similar stories, and her recorder sat ready to capture the truth. Mrs. Thompson, your case is particularly egregious because your daughter-in-law is systematically erasing your presence from your own home while demanding you pay for the privilege of staying, Sarah explained, her voice carrying both professional objectivity and personal outrage. She's not just taking your housing, she's stealing your identity, your history, and your dignity. Is this legal? I asked, though I dreaded the answer that might confirm my worst fears. Unfortunately, mostly yes. When properties transfer to adult children through inheritance, elderly parents often have few legal protections under current Colorado law. But the emotional and psychological abuse you're describing, the deliberate withholding of information about estate assets, that's a different story entirely. Sarah pulled out her digital recorder with practiced efficiency. Would you be willing to go on record? I'm documenting a pattern of elder abuse disguised as financial responsibility, and your story could help expose this growing crisis. For the first time since Robert's death, I felt a spark of hope ignite in my chest. This wasn't just about my personal situation anymore. It was about exposing a systemic problem that was destroying families across America while society looked the other way. That evening, I returned home to find Jessica hosting an elaborate dinner party in my dining room, using my good china and serving expensive wine from Robert's carefully curated collection. She barely acknowledged my presence as I passed through to grab a simple dinner of leftover soup, treating me like household help rather than the woman who owned these dishes and had chosen this wine with loving care. "Oh, Margaret," she called, out sweetly, her voice dripping with false concern. "I hope you found work today. Only 10 days left. Time is running out." Her guests laughed, as if my homelessness were an amusing inconvenience, their conversation continuing over my grandmother's china while they discussed their upcoming vacations and home renovations. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but now I had allies, hope, and a plan for justice. 8 days into Jessica's ultimatum, I was organizing my financial documents for Sarah's investigation when I stumbled upon a manila folder tucked behind Robert's antique desk drawer. The desk itself was a family heirloom, passed down from his grandfather, and I had been carefully preserving his important papers when my fingers brushed against something hidden in the back compartment. Inside that forgotten folder were bank statements, property documents, insurance policies, and correspondence that would change everything I thought I knew about my family's financial situation. My hands trembled as I read through Robert's financial arrangements, each document revealing another layer of deception that had been orchestrated around my grief. The house hadn't just been left to Michael. It had been fully paid off 2 years before Robert's death, with explicit written instructions in his will that I should have lifetime residency rights. But there was much more, so much more than I could have imagined. A life insurance policy worth $500,000 had been paid directly to Michael upon Robert's death. Investment accounts totaling nearly $200,000 had also been transferred to him immediately following the funeral. My husband, knowing his health was failing and wanting to protect both of us, had carefully arranged for both Michael and me to be financially secure for the rest of our lives. The monthly mortgage payments Jessica claimed were enormous and threatening our family's financial stability didn't exist. The house was completely debt-free and had been for years. Additional documents revealed Robert's detailed financial planning, a separate trust fund established for my care, specific instructions about maintaining the house and grounds, and even provisions for my healthcare needs as I aged. He had thought of everything except the possibility that his own son would betray these wishes for personal gain. I called Sarah immediately, my voice shaking with rage and disbelief. "They've been lying about everything," I whispered into the phone, afraid Jessica might overhear from her yoga room upstairs. "There is no mortgage. There are no financial struggles. Michael inherited over $500,000, and they're not struggling. They're stealing from me while I grieve." "Mrs. Thompson, this changes everything." Sarah's voice carried new urgency and excitement. Financial exploitation of a surviving spouse is a felony in Colorado, especially when it involves deliberate deception about estate assets. Can you get me copies of those documents immediately? This isn't just elder abuse anymore. This is fraud. That afternoon, while Jessica was at her expensive yoga class and Michael was at his comfortable office job, I methodically photographed every page, every bank statement, every legal document that exposed their elaborate deception. The evidence was overwhelming and damning. Robert's detailed letter to Michael specifically stated, "Your stepmother, Margaret, raised you as her own son and deserves to live in comfort and dignity in the home we built together. The financial resources I'm providing should ensure both of your futures are secure without any concerns about housing or basic needs." There were also records showing that Jessica had been researching the property's market value and had consulted with real estate agents about potential sales, all while convincing me that we were facing financial hardship. She had been planning to force me out and profit from selling my home, adding hundreds of thousands more to their already substantial windfall from Robert's death. When Jessica returned home that evening, designer yoga mat slung over her shoulder and carrying an expensive smoothie, she found me sitting calmly in the living room with the documents spread across the coffee table like evidence in a courtroom. Her face went pale as she recognized what I had discovered, her usual confident demeanor cracking like a mask falling away. "Where did you find those?" she demanded, her voice rising with panic and anger. "In my husband's desk. The desk in my house. The house that's completely paid off, along with enough inheritance money to support both Michael and me comfortably for the rest of our lives." I stood up slowly, feeling stronger and more determined than I had in months. "There is no mortgage, Jessica. There are no overwhelming expenses threatening our family's stability. You've been trying to steal my home while sitting on $500,000 of inheritance money that was specifically designated to protect me." Michael walked in at that moment, stopping dead in his tracks when he saw the documents scattered across the table. The guilt written across his face confirmed everything I suspected. He had known about the deception all along. His participation? He wasn't passive, it was deliberate and calculated. "Mom, Margaret, I can explain," he started, but his words sounded hollow, even to him. "Explain what? That you've been emotionally torturing a grieving widow while hoarding the money your father left to take care of both of us? Explain how you were prepared to make me homeless while you renovate my bedroom into an office?" My voice grew stronger with each word. "Explain how you could look me in the eye every day knowing you were stealing my security and dignity?" Jessica recovered her composure with disturbing speed, revealing the calculating nature beneath her panic. "Those documents don't change anything legally. Michael inherited the property, and we decide who lives here. You're still not contributing financially to household expenses." The audacity took my breath away, but I was ready with my response. "What? Household expenses?" I laughed, but it was bitter and filled with righteous anger. "The utilities you could pay for a year with 1 month's interest from Robert's investments? The property taxes that Robert prepaid through 2026? The house maintenance that the trust fund was specifically designed to cover?" The mask was completely off now, and I could see the greed and manipulation that had driven every interaction since Robert's funeral. Subscribe and like this video. Tomorrow, you'll see how this story ends and justice is finally served. The law offices of Martinez and Associates occupied the 15th floor of a gleaming downtown Denver high-rise with panoramic views of the Rocky Mountains that seemed to symbolize the strength and permanence I desperately needed in my life. The office buzzed with purposeful energy as attorney David Martinez reviewed my case, his experienced eyes scanning through documents with the precision of someone who had spent decades fighting for justice. Sarah, the journalist, had connected. Me with David. No relation despite the shared surname, just a shared commitment to protecting the vulnerable from those who would exploit them. "Mrs. Thompson, this is one of the clearest cases of elder financial exploitation I've seen in 20 years of practice," David said, his voice carrying both professional authority and personal outrage. He spread the damning evidence across his mahogany conference table like a prosecutor preparing for trial. Colorado's elder abuse statute specifically criminalizes what your son and daughter-in-law have done. The emotional coercion, the deliberate withholding of inheritance information, the threats of homelessness while controlling substantial assets. It's textbook abuse with aggravating factors. David explained that my case involved multiple felonies: financial exploitation of an at-risk adult, theft by deception, and criminal impersonation of financial hardship. The evidence I had discovered proved premeditation and systematic abuse that went far beyond simple family disputes over money. Within hours of our meeting, David had filed emergency motions for both civil and criminal proceedings. The civil case sought immediate restoration of my residency rights, access to the funds Robert had intended for my care, and substantial damages for the emotional trauma I had endured. The criminal referral detailed how Jessica and Michael had systematically deceived and exploited a vulnerable elderly person during her most difficult period of grief and adjustment. We're also requesting a restraining order preventing them from disposing of any assets or making changes to the property until this matter is resolved, David explained. They've shown they're willing to act quickly and ruthlessly to eliminate evidence of their abuse. When I returned home that evening, I found the atmosphere completely transformed. Michael was pacing nervously in the kitchen like a caged animal, constantly checking his phone and running his hands through his hair. Jessica sat rigidly at the dining room table with her own phone pressed to her ear, clearly speaking to a lawyer and trying to control damage that was already spiraling beyond her ability to manipulate. "Margaret," Michael said carefully when he saw me, his voice lacking its usual confidence. "Maybe we should talk about this reasonably. There might have been some misunderstandings about Dad's intentions and the best way to handle the estate." "Misunderstandings?" I sat down calmly, at my own kitchen table, finally able to enjoy the role reversal after months of being treated like an unwelcome intruder. Like misunderstanding that you inherited $500,000 while threatening to make your stepmother homeless? Or misunderstanding that this house is completely paid off while claiming you couldn't afford mortgage payments that don't exist? Jessica ended her call abruptly, her face flushed with anger and something I had never seen from her before: genuine fear about consequences she couldn't control or manipulate away. "Our attorney says we still have legal ownership of this property regardless of your father's sentimental wishes or outdated instructions." "Actually," I replied calmly, pulling out official-looking documents David had prepared with impressive speed. "Colorado law is very clear about elder exploitation. When beneficiaries use inheritance assets to abuse, threaten, or defraud surviving family members, courts can and will redistribute those assets. David thinks I have an excellent case for claiming the entire estate was obtained through duress and deception, which would make the original transfers void." The color drained from Jessica's face as she realized her legal position wasn't as strong as she had assumed. Her expensive attorney had clearly delivered sobering news about the potential consequences of their actions. The next morning brought unexpected but official visitors who arrived with badges and authority that couldn't be dismissed or manipulated. Detective Lisa Park from the Denver Police Department's Elder Abuse Unit knocked on my front door at exactly 9 a.m., accompanied by a social worker from Adult Protective Services and a forensic accountant who specialized in financial crimes against vulnerable adults. "We're conducting welfare checks on several elderly residents who have reported similar threats from family members," Detective Park explained, her professional demeanor carrying an underlying compassion that immediately put me at ease. "Your case has helped us identify what appears to be a growing trend of inheritance-related elder abuse across the Denver metropolitan area." As the detective interviewed Jessica and Michael separately in different rooms, I learned that I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. My case had become part of a larger investigation into how adult children across Colorado were systematically exploiting inheritance laws to push elderly parents out of their homes while claiming moral and financial justification for their actions. Dorothy and Eleanor arrived mid-afternoon like reinforcements in my battle for justice, bringing news that other families were coming forward with similar stories. The Denver Post is running Sarah's investigation as a 3-part series starting this Sunday, Eleanor announced with satisfaction. Your courage to speak out has inspired dozens of other seniors to report similar abuse. You've started something much bigger than just your individual case. That evening, as police finished documenting evidence and social services completed their assessment, Jessica approached me with a completely different demeanor. Gone was the arrogant authority and cruel confidence, replaced by something I had never seen from her before: genuine fear about consequences she couldn't control through manipulation or intimidation. "Margaret, maybe we can work something out," she said quietly, her voice lacking its usual commanding tone. "Perhaps we acted hastily in our grief. We could discuss a reasonable arrangement for you to stay in the house permanently." I looked at this woman who had terrorized me during the darkest period of my life, who had called me a freeloader and threatened me with homelessness while sitting on a fortune specifically designated for my security and comfort. "Jessica, the time for reasonable arrangements was 3 months ago, before you decided to torture a grieving widow for sport and profit. Subscribe and like this video. Tomorrow you'll see how this story reaches its satisfying conclusion." 6. Weeks after that terrible ultimatum that had nearly destroyed my life and faith in family, I stood in my living room watching Jessica and Michael pack their belongings with the defeated resignation of people who had gambled everything and lost spectacularly. The judge's ruling had been swift, comprehensive, and uncompromising. Not only were my residency rights permanently restored, but the court had also ordered immediate access to all inheritance funds Robert had designated for my care, plus substantial additional damages that would ensure my financial security for the rest of my life. Judge Patricia Williams had been particularly harsh and thorough in her judgment, reading her decision with the authority of someone who had seen enough elder abuse to recognize its most insidious forms. This court finds the defendant's conduct toward Mrs. Thompson to constitute severe elder financial and emotional abuse of the most calculating variety. Using inheritance assets to coerce and threaten a vulnerable surviving spouse while systematically attempting to erase her presence from her own home represents exactly the type of exploitation our laws are designed to prevent and punish severely. The financial settlement was substantial and comprehensive. Beyond restoring my rightful inheritance, the court had ordered additional damages for emotional distress, punitive measures that would follow Jessica and Michael for years, and the establishment of a monitored trust that would ensure they could never again use financial leverage to abuse elderly family members. The $500,000 life insurance payment and investment accounts were redirected to a new trust, ensuring not just my lifetime financial security, but also funding for a foundation supporting other elder abuse victims. But the real victory wasn't monetary. It was the transformation of my story from personal tragedy to public catalyst for systemic change. Sarah's investigative series had sparked statewide conversations about elder protection, leading to new legislation strengthening survivors' rights, creating stronger penalties for family financial exploitation, and establishing better reporting systems for vulnerable seniors facing abuse from their own children. "Mom, Margaret," Michael said quietly as he loaded the last boxes into his car, his voice carrying shame that seemed to age him beyond his years. "I want you to know that I never meant for things to go this far. Jessica convinced me that we were just being practical about estate management, but I realize now how wrong we were and how much damage we caused." I studied his face carefully, looking for traces of the little boy I had once loved unconditionally and raised as my own son. "Michael, what you and Jessica did wasn't practical estate management. It was systematic cruelty designed to steal my home and dignity. You were prepared to destroy your stepmother's life for money you didn't even need, while I grieved the loss of the only man I ever loved. That's not a mistake or misunderstanding. That's a choice that reveals character at its core." Jessica remained defiant to the very end, her narcissistic personality unable to accept responsibility even in complete defeat. "You won this round, Margaret, but don't think this is over. We'll appeal everything, and eventually the courts will see reason about property rights and inheritance law." "Actually," I replied with calm satisfaction, "your attorney already advised against any appeals after reviewing the criminal charges that are still pending. The forensic accountant found evidence of additional financial irregularities that could result in federal charges. Any further harassment of me will result in additional charges, and your legal troubles are just beginning, not ending." Detective Park had informed me earlier that Jessica and Michael's case was now part of a broader federal investigation into organized elder exploitation. Their methods had been so systematic and well documented that authorities suspected they had researched and potentially targeted other elderly family members in similar schemes, making this a pattern rather than an isolated incident. As their car disappeared down my tree-lined street for the final time, I felt a profound sense of peace settle over the house like a warm blanket. The rooms felt like home again, filled with Robert's loving presence and our shared memories rather than the toxic atmosphere of greed and manipulation that had poisoned every corner of my sanctuary for months. Eleanor and Dorothy arrived that evening for a victory celebration dinner, along with Sarah, several other seniors whose cases had been strengthened by the legal precedent my battle had established, and David Martinez, who had become not just my attorney, but a genuine advocate for elder rights. We raised glasses of Robert's finest wine I was now free to enjoy in my own dining room without asking permission or fearing punishment. To Margaret, Eleanor toasted with tears in her eyes, who proved that being elderly doesn't mean being powerless, and that family abuse can be defeated with courage, evidence, and the right allies. The real celebration, however, was represented by the stack of letters covering my kitchen counter from seniors across the country who had read about my case in newspapers and online articles. Elderly people facing similar family exploitation now had a roadmap for fighting back. Legal precedents to cite, and attorneys specializing in elder law were reporting a surge in successful cases using strategies pioneered in my legal battle. 3 months later, I received an official call from the Colorado Legislature's Committee on Aging. They wanted me to testify in support of comprehensive new elder protection laws that would make family financial exploitation a felony with mandatory minimum sentences, and create stronger safeguards for surviving spouses facing inheritance-related abuse. My personal nightmare had become a statewide movement for justice that was spreading to other states across America. As I sit here now in my beautiful, secure home, surrounded by lifetime memories, genuine financial security, and the knowledge that my suffering has prevented countless others from facing similar abuse, I reflect on how this battle fundamentally changed me. I'm no longer just Margaret Thompson, the grieving widow who was nearly destroyed by family greed and manipulation. I'm Margaret Thompson, the woman who fought back against elder abuse and won, not just for herself, but for every senior citizen who deserves dignity, respect, and protection from those who would exploit their vulnerability for personal gain. Sometimes, justice doesn't just prevail. It transforms the entire landscape of what's possible when ordinary people refuse to accept extraordinary cruelty. Thanks for following this incredible journey of courage and justice. Subscribe and like for more stories of ordinary people achieving extraordinary victories against those who abuse power.